Hello, I'm delighted to be asked to represent the Isle of Man at the conference and speak about a topic very close to my heart, that of engaging with people and changing their behaviour to do something positive for nature. In my talk today, I'm going to give a short introduction to the Isle of Man, a little bit about Manx Wildlife Trust, and also about the wider Federation of Wildlife Trusts across the British Isles that we're a member, and then a little bit about the detail about, why do we actually want to change behaviour of people? How does that help nature and conservation? Who are the key audiences we want to engage with to do that? I'm going to give an example of what another wildlife trust in the British Isles has been doing, then some examples of some of the work that we've been doing in the Isle of Man, which I know is going to be similar to the work many of you do in your islands, and then potentially some questions about maybe ways that we could do it differently in the future, and maybe ways that we can do it together in the future. So we'll start with the Isle of Man. So the Isle of Man is the only complete nation in the world that's a biosphere, where Manx Wildlife Trust is an independent Manx charity, and we're one of 46 wildlife trusts that spread across the British Isles. There are 3 that are not in the mainland UK. There's Northern Ireland Ulster, there's Alderney, who are also presenting at this conference, and then ourselves, the Isle of Man. And everything we do first and foremost is for the Isle of Man, but we're very conscious that strategically we're positioned right in the middle of the Irish Sea and right in the middle of the British Isles. So in terms of nature data collection, we're in an important location. And we're also very proud to have this year joined the UK Overseas Territories Conservation Forum as a Crown dependency, and we're also part of the wider small island networks through Island Innovation. So there's lots of ways that we link up. The Wildlife Trust movement, synchronous with me, so literally I joined the Wildlife Trust movement just over a year ago, and almost the day I landed back in the UK from 2 years actually in St Helena, I went to Cardiff, joined a Wildlife Trust strategic planning meeting, and at that meeting it came clear that there was a change in the Federation, and very much the 46 wildlife trusts plus the central office working together, and through that we've evolved or evolving a new strategy which is set to go live later this year. And within that there are 3 core pillars: nature-based solutions, nature recovery networks, and the one I'm going to touch and focus on today is around connecting people to wildlife, making 1 in 4 people ideally take some positive action to improve wildlife and the environment. So how do we or what are the audiences we want to be actually trying to encourage to do things differently? Well, in different locations, I'm sure in different islands, you'll have different priorities of the audiences you really want to engage with. But generally we've got the general public, whatever general public means, the key decision makers. Crucial for us and for many wildlife trusts I know is the farmers and the landowners which own and manage a huge amount of the land. Tourists and visitors, young people, and the corporates and the businesses, that the people hopefully with their corporate service responsibility will actually help fund some positive things within our environment. So lots of audiences. Now here's the example. So in the southwest corner of the mainland UK is a county called Cornwall, and the Cornwall Wildlife Trust for the last few years have been very much developing how they engage with different audiences to drive a positive shift in behaviour. And why should they do that? Well, we have bold ambitions as wildlife trusts, and I know the organisations listening in, some of them I know, and they also have bold ambitions. How can we do really big things for the environment? But we're, relatively small organisations, most of us, small charities, small teams, and we don't have control over much of the land. So if we really want to affect change, hopefully we want the masses, the bulk of the population, to do something positive. And we need to encourage them, inspire them and enable them and find different tactics to do that. So in Cornwall, 4% of Cornwall roughly is owned by the Cornwall Wildlife Trust as nature reserves. But through various initiatives, working with farmers, landowners, the public, they've now got a baseline of over 20% of Cornwall that they believe is now being managed effectively for nature. So that's a massive increase by working through other people. And similar wildlife trusts can do that. And the ambition is that together we can influence large amounts of land. Now the way they did this in Cornwall is that they sat down as an internal team initially, and this is one of the sheets that they went through, and they identified their key audiences, and for them it was farmers, landowners, and I think young people were the next on the list. And this is one of the sheets from the workshop they ran around the young people, and they were actually identifying what the opportunities were, what the behaviours were they trying to change. And maybe it's not a precise science, but they tried to get it to a place where they really focused into what they were trying to do and why, and then rolled it out. And I think it's been really successful. Now, if I come back to the Isle of Man now, let's scale that. So there's a model, or there's an image of the Isle of Man. Our nature reserves, Manx Wildlife Trust, we've got some fantastic nature reserves, 25 of them spread across the island, but their complete combined area is only 0.2% of the Isle of Man. And if you then look at agriculture, that's 88% of the Isle of Man, you can see we absolutely want to cherish and look after and conserve the land that's our own, and we can do that, and we do that extremely well. But imagine if we could get a positive shift over some of the remaining 99.8%, and especially some of that agricultural land. So our ambition goes beyond our own nature reserves to work with other people to really try and develop that nature recovery network and nature-based solutions across the island. And along with the wider Wildlife Trust movement, we set a target of 30% of land and seas managed for nature by 2030. And we're now trying to focus on, how do we change the behaviour of some of the 85 to 90,000 people that live in the Isle of Man so that they can help us achieve that goal. And so what are our key audiences? Well, I think first and foremost, 88% of the land is agriculture. Farmers are an absolutely crucial audience for us, and not so much in the Isle of Man, but generally across the world probably. There's been a history of some disagreement, perhaps in some cases even conflict between conservationists and farmers. But we, Manx Wildlife Trust and the Wildlife Trust movement as a whole, really believe that we need to be pragmatic. We have to work with farmers. We have to try and help them. We shouldn't expect them all to suddenly miraculously take 10 steps forward. If we could get 1 step forward or 2 steps forward over 88% of our island, that's a massive win for nature, and that's our goal. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we do it at a strategic level. We connect. So we've got a memorandum of understanding that we've signed this year with the Manx National Farmers Union, and that's been put in place in June this year. And we meet with them quarterly, and we're having extremely positive dialogues, and we're looking at developing, for example, a joint education initiative. But most excitingly in the island, this year we're launching, or the government is launching, a new agri-environment scheme. Manx Wildlife Trust are hoping to be part of the delivery of that, but depending on the level of whether we're up to our neck in it or just dipping our feet in the water with it, we're certainly keen to influence and help those farmers to the solutions that they need to be carrying out in their land for nature. So it's an exciting time and a great opportunity for Manx Wildlife Trust to engage even more. Schools. I guess that many of you watching this presentation, if you're in organisations, will be running school programmes. It's fundamental that we want to influence the behaviour and educate the next generations, and many organisations in the Isle of Man do that. Now this image is actually the second meeting. We formed a new group last year, and Manx Wildlife Trust were instrumental in helping set this up, and it's the Environmental Educators Group. And this is basically everything from Manx Whale and Dolphin Watch, Manx Bird Life, the Isle of Man Government, Beach Buddies, the Manx National Farmers Union, One World Centre, I could keep going, the UNESCO Biosphere reps, and everyone that delivers environmental education came together, and we're now trying to work together better and trying to drive collaborative approaches to delivering top line things around Eco Schools initiative and also the United Nations Sustainable Development Schools. How can we do that better across the island's schools? And 2 meetings in, really good, couple of joint bids, already some joint working, some tool packets have been created, so it's going the right way. Engaging with adults through different ways, again, it's common within many NGOs, environmental NGOs, to do that. I'm going to flag wave a little bit for some of the things that we're doing in the Isle of Man, as you'd expect. The top picture there is our Festival of the Sea. So I have an interest in the marine world, and I've come to a place now where we run what I have to say is one of the most amazing adult education events. So in short, what happens is we get local divers to collect marine life for a couple of days. And then it goes into tanks, and we get the public in over a 2-day period who come in, look at that, engage with it through our volunteer network. We had 4,500 people visit our marquee over the weekend, so amazing. We've just launched a wildlife gardening certificate course, which is proving to be popular, and a huge amount of citizen science, seal watching, recording strandings, invert groups, floral surveys. So we've got a huge pool of volunteers that are collecting biological data for us. We've also got a fantastic partnership with the wildlife park that started this year. So any of you that have engaged with zoos, aquariums or wildlife parks will know that most of them have a conservation fund. They tend to fund programs, orangutans in Borneo, for example, rhinos in Africa, and the wildlife park does exactly that. But this year they're now engaging with local conservation projects through us, which is brilliant, because that means that when the people that go to the wildlife park, who are a completely different audience to the people that would visit a nature reserve. And my 2 years at Edinburgh Zoo, at the Zoological Society in Scotland, taught me that. You can engage with a whole different audience now about local conservation through our wildlife park. So we're delighted with that. Digital. I could talk lots about digital engagement. We all do it. I tweet, there's no shame in that. We all have websites and Instagram accounts and Facebook accounts. You know, for Manx Wildlife Trust, we've got 10,000 Facebook followers, which we're proud of, and you know, we really believe that when we post something, they like it and they do something different. But you know, we can't. It's difficult to measure that, and I think with a lot of these things, be it an education class in a school, be it an event, Festival of the Sea, or running a course, or putting a tweet out, we believe it's doing the right thing, and it probably is. But how do we know it's the best thing, and how much impact is that actually having? And I think there's, you know, for me, this is coming to sort of the nub of this, is that how do we question our approaches to actually changing behaviour? And there's much theory about behaviour change. This is just one infographic I lifted from Google Images. So there's a whole range of theory, and marketing advertising agencies make a huge amount of money out of, you know, basically doing behaviour change to get people to spend money. And I would suggest, and probably have done for a few years now, that conservationists, be they in botanic gardens, zoos, aquariums, wildlife trusts or national trusts, we're not social scientists. We're not actually behaviour change people experts. We know about the environment and land and habitats. And I'd suggest that we actually could do it better if we got those experts in. Now, one such expert that I actually worked with when I was at the Royal Botanic Garden, Edinburgh, a few years ago, was this lady, which is Professor Katja Nevis, who works at Concordia University in Canada. And Katja is a social scientist, very much around behaviours of people. And she did some work with whalers, becoming whale watchers, and then in botanic gardens. And she's now engaged with the wildlife trusts to help us see if we can roll up programmes across the whole of the Federation to change behaviour en masse. I'd also say, look, we're doing this in the Wildlife Trust, the Zoo and Aquarium Association's doing this, you know, Extinction Rebellion's doing this, the Woodland Trust is doing this, Botanic Gardens, Friends of the Earth. There's a huge spectrum of environmental organisations who all want to change, I would suggest, similar behaviours in people so that the planet is a better place to live on. I haven't got many examples of them actually joining forces and aligning strategies. So imagine if you went to a zoo and you were getting the same messages on palm oil, and then you went somewhere else and they reinforce that message perhaps in a different way, so that we identify what those key behaviours are, you know, plastics recycling, biodiversity, etc., etc. So I think there's a real opportunity for actual organisations to join forces on this. So my final slide is really bringing us back to the islands, UK overseas territories, Crown dependencies and other small islands. I've seen enough in small islands myself, and you know, places I've worked, to know that generally people are working with small budgets, small places. It's difficult to network, but there's also huge amounts of collaboration trying to go on. And I think probably one of the benefits of COVID is that now we're all collaborating more through online Zoom conversations. So my sort of last point is that if anyone's watching this and thinks they'd like to engage around a wider conversation about how we might work together for behaviour change, and would like to get in touch, please get in touch with me at Manx Wildlife Trust. We'd really love to hear from you and find ways that we can work together. Thank you.